Video material prepared especially for 2022 Epic Mega Jam History of the Origins of the Above the Sky game prototype.
Today we want to present to you our project which we managed to do in 1 week of jam. English is not our native language, but we tried very hard on the game in this video. We made subtitles for convenience. Enjoy watching.
We are a team of enthusiasts who have long been friends in common interests decided to take part in this jam, despite the acute political situation in our country, Ukraine. Unfortunately, these days it's hard to find time even for a trivial thing, let alone anything more. Nevertheless, we were able to devote 168 hours of our time to the contest. If we talk briefly about the team, the important thing to mention are that we are 19 to 20 years old, and we are all self-taught. We also have our main project Impulse, which we have been working on for the second year. But we took a break for a week for the good on the contest. The link to our station is in the description under the video. We found out about the jam from the official Epic Games Source in the news line a week before it started, and immediately began to try predict the theme of the jam. During that moment we had a few drafts of the game prototype, but in just 1 hour we had an idea to make something dynamic and beautiful. A direct reference was the game Story About My Uncle. We decided to repeat the basic mechanic, but in our own style. It was me, with tasks like assigning responsibilities to the rest of the team and reviewing the guys' work. And in my spare time I could afford to do quick low-poly sculpting of important 3D models of the game. Angel, it had everything to do with the 2D part. It wrote location concept, in-game character images and the visual component of the cutscene. There was also a little bit of 2D animation and model texturing. Kate did the level Ds, the environment and turned the entire composition. 95% of the map was built by him. So did the lighting and the off-shot skybox setting, fog and everything else that is responsible for the visuals. And in addition touched the optimization of 3D mesh. Ivan, he had everything to do with the code, the math and the game itself. He was the coder of the game. All the mechanics used, core and other technical nuances went to him. The man who gave voice to the project and simply worked wonders. The music in the menus, the music in the game and the music in the cutscene were the work of Michael. Also, all the sound used in the project were written personally, not downloaded from the internet. In this way, we began prototyping the game Above the Sky. First day of project development, finding a common style. The first thing we decided to do was to see how story about my uncle was made, which was a smart decision. We didn't reinvent the wheel and saved a lot of time. Kita and Ivan went to go to know the game better, and they tasted in person. The important thing was to understand the core of the game and its payoff, how it feels and what use it evokes in the player. Angel, on other hand, went to study the references of such games as Genshin Impact, No Man's Sky and A Story About My Uncle. He had to find the connection casuals between these games, the things that united them and made them exciting. That fine line that only an artist can discern. Michael began a close examination of the same games as Angel, but on the music and sound side. You should not neglect the sound, although at first it may seem like a trifle. In fact, good sound in the game carries first of all the sonic return to the player, and is it half of the verbal sources of information from the game. The first is the visual component, but because of the 3 deadline, to achieve a good picture not was possible. On this, Michael had to take the full blow. Meanwhile, I willfully didn't download story about my uncle, because I didn't want to take too much from the game. I wanted to add personality and unique ways to the game, so I started looking for fresh sources of inspiration and started building a board of the refs in PureRef. After 4 hours, we each had our own extensive individual baggage of experience that we used until the end of the jam. We were charged and fully prepared because everyone had an approximate picture of what needed to be released. Later on, of course, it gave way to a number of revisions, but the concept did not change. This gave us a stable base from which we had to work. Our hands were already itching and we wanted to go into battle. Overflowing with enthusiasm, we began development of the same day. At first, we chose the 3D kit mesh model with Neo City and tried to implement the embodied ideas with it. The idea was to jump on buildings levitation in the air and to get higher and higher by means of parkour. And in the first hour we had such ready reference of our location. They were generated by a neural network and looked good and not the time. It didn't give any specific, but it showed the abstraction of the other dimension. But after the centering number of hours, the idea was rejected because the city in the same setting cyberpunk does not fit our ideas and simply went against the conceptual idea of the game. It was a choice between using the model, poor implementation of the game itself and its atmosphere, and a good realization of its origin idea, but without using 3D kit mesh Neo City. The choice was of vision to us. We always advocate good implementation and presentation of the idea of the game. We had the task of realizing of kind of astral world without hovering island of which you have to jump and run away from a misty demon who must chase the player. At the same time, collection oxygen cylinders lying on island. Otherwise, if they do not collect, the player could suffocate and the game would start again. We had a complete idea. The only thing she needed to add dynamic with would be player quickly, but at the same time not to overdo it, because we wanted to convey the lore and narrative of the same through its visualization. That's why the option of just increasing the charter speed fell out right away. They decided to add instead the possibility to run up the wall, double jump, spreads on just accelerate roll up. That's what the crouch was for, and in addition to all of the above, grapple hook, thanks to which you can climb in flight to hovering object. We found this idea quite dynamic and proceeded to this implementation. I handed out my completed PureRef board of the game location concept and what the game should look like visually. Even started coding the basic charters mechanics, movement, jump and grapple hook. Angel rushed to draw concept of game location and worlds. Environment and other idea he had picked up from the game he was familiar with. Michael began to select option for music accompaniment of the gameplay part, based on the overflow dynamic of the project. 𝐿𝐄𝐆𝐀 surfaced the Quixel bridge, trying to find the perfect rock what would make up the entire game, although we didn't know that at the time. After 6 hours of work, we decided to call it a day and went to bed. On that note, the first day work ended.
The next day we gathered at 12 noon and we were shocked that since we started off the contest, it's been more than 24 hours and we still have nothing clear. From then on it was decided to take turns sleeping because too much time is spent sleeping and the project has to come out ideal and good, which requires many hours, which means sleepless and night for us, I drops and cans energy drinks on the table. In the second day we managed to realize not a few. From the beginning I began prototyping the game location. It was planned to implement a couple of levels or split into several biomes which would add color to the game. But later we abandoned the idea as it could take too much time, which would not be justified. I managed to find suitable rock would make the islands jump on. I exported to the Blender and set up my collision. To allow you to run on it, I also made several variations of this rock. One variation was the regular version of the stone, and it was used the most. The other one was prepared in special for the vertex paint. Later I used this to decorate the stone with moss and other things which diversified the location. And the third was the readjust polygonage and texture resolution, which allow you to use this version a lot of times without loading the system, something along the lines of loads. Since we planned to connect the 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿, we had abandoned the nanites through which the light introduced itself incorrectly, in favor of this planet to introduce loads to optimize the game. But that was less days. Each odd had a lot of secondary and other things to do. We realized that is not we would have time and implement such a thing. And for this reason we introduced such an optimized move, who somehow reduce the load and the optimized game. Which is the reason why our project came out is resource intensity laggy. 3 versions of the stone, as only static lot original detail, 2 lot middle, 3 lot low polymorphs they use on violence, for object and the cave. After about 5 hours I began to have a picture what the map should look like, but I was worried that it would be too dull and faded. I needed to add something interesting scenery. I went to find my reference and assembly a new board implement my ideas. Meanwhile, Danny was already hard on work his reference which he had managed to find. Since on ZBrush he took up low poly sculptures of interesting objects that were stylistically appropriate for their location. But that time 2 variations of flying walls had already been prepared. Initially it was planned that I would be possible to jump on them, but later we abandoned such ideas. After all, it was impossible to implement all your ideas in 7 days. But then Ivan had managed to implement the most important thing, the cat hook. It's initially the backbone of the game, so we needed the hook to work properly. Many hours we spent figuring out how to do this addictive. Since we had never done such a game before, there were many things we accounted for the first time. We had every predictive job, each helping the other in any way we could and being in the charge of our own area, covering it completely. We worked the first 2 days at predictive pace a team. By nightfall, half of the team had gone to bed to regain strength, while the other half continued to work addictive to the best of their abilities. Overnight we had a lot of edit and change. We decided on the right hook and jump length for the character, which gave us an idea on the right level design and the right placement of the floating stones. Everything depends on accurate numbers to make it more comfortable to play and not look cheesy.
At the space of work we set until the morning of the next 24 hours. In the morning, a call comes from Danny with a similar text. "Hello, we have some bad news," he says. "Angel is temporarily unable to participate in contest. How long it will take neither me nor him don't know." The fact that Angel was volunteering at the time in connection with the war between Russia and Ukraine. He applied before the contest and didn't know when he would get a callback. And they called him at the wrong time, when he was busy at the gym. But in principle was never on time. And the second news, Michael will also be temporarily away from the GM for an unknown period of time. He had to solve the military registration and it was in another city, so he had to go to another, solve his affairs and come back, which takes a lot of time. To say it was a blow to morale is like saying nothing, but main thing is that it did not affect my ability to work. But on the contrary, it even somehow motivated me to work harder, because a loss is not a reason to fold your hands and admit defeat. I was sure the guys would come as soon as they could and we'd finish what we started together. Because we worked in Discord, we had quite cooperative work, and most importantly, there were no leaks of actual information. At the time, it was ready for the code component implemented the main movement of the main character, its mechanics, that is sprint, backhoe and jump, as well as the grapple hook, which needed to finish to work correctly. Later I started implementing running on walls, vertical gameplay. We wanted to implement such possibility. It seemed like an interesting solution to us, so I got to work. At the time, Danny was working with 𝐄𝐏𝐈𝐂. They were both working on the basic concept of the game location. Since we decided on the map, its style and fact that there will be one common level. It was necessary to make checkpoints, and the idea was to create a big island for each checkpoint, make several landscapes and fill them with surroundings. So perhaps the narrative reveals a part of the game's lore, and so on. But of the 5 of us, no one could do it well, so Danny took over the task and went into deep study of the topic for 2 days. By then, he was busy with 3D sculpting and general coordination. He still had time, so he could afford to take extra custody of something. 𝐄𝐏𝐈𝐂 had been then started to create an atlas map for all the objects used on the map. This is a very good saving of resources. In addition to, we used our own textures. Naturally, they were simple and made as monochrome materials. Since time was running out, we were able to accomplish a lot in those 2 days, and we were quite happy with the result. By the end of the day, 𝐄𝐏𝐈𝐂 and I went to bed, since we had missed the previous night and needed to draw strength from somewhere.
We spent the next day as quietly as possible, each having his own assignment and completed. We didn't coordinate much or exchange suggestion for edits, mostly everyone was focusing on work. With 3 days to go, half of the jam was over. We were past hard part. All that was left to do was refine the backbone and superficially polish. I worked strictly according to my concept and didn't stray far from them. I wanted to use something darker, so I often took various chains that severed and links between the islands. Also various bones, dragon skulls and monsters. They were portrayed by Angel by his concepts, and the concepts were sculpted by Danny. That's how imported concepts are drawn the first day, but useful all the way through. I didn't have to invent something new and spend time on it. Angel by that time took a parallel to the implementation of the UI, that is the site. To make it easier to aim with the grab hook, he drew it and sent it to Ivan. We wanted to make the UI much more interesting than animated. We planned was also to add not only the site, but for well no reason we did not take it. By evening, Danny came in with a landscape demonstration for the island with the checkpoint. It naturally didn't look great, since it was his first time doing it, but the result was quietly watchable. As soon as we started porting them to our working project, we ran into a new trouble. Its intention didn't look bad, and even embodied all of our ideas. But these landscapes weighed too much, and with limits for the contest was 1-2 gigabytes. It was possible to solve the problem by optimizing the landscape's grid, but it was a big loss of the graphical rendering side. We simply did not calculate our strength in this regard. That's why Danny's 2 days' work was unfortunately without place. But even of the disadvantages of the should choose the best. Thanks to these landscapes, we took fuchsia vegetation and made guides out of them. They really brought the map to life.
By the evening of the day, I was back home, having successfully solved my cases. The first thing I had to realize was the music for the game itself. Considering her fast-paced dynamics and deep landscapes, I tried to mix in something quite like the ambient and the drums they adds dynamics. It wasn't easy to do, and there are not many places where it is used. But since I am not a beginner in my business, I had a few ideas how to implement it well. By the morning I had the main soundtrack for the game ready. I went back a little bit from the original idea of mixing ambient and drums, because in the middle I realized that it would take more time to get a good result of this idea. But the soundtrack that I made instead of the first one was deep enough. It fully revealed the potential plot of the game it wanted to explore, and as it turned out later, I was right about that. Then I started creating sounds for the game based on what mechanics Ivan had already implemented by that time.
Around this time, around noon, I also rejoined the ranks of working our staff, our team. I came back after finish my business and was a serious mood to catch up. Our plan was followed. We will promote our project in several directions. The first is a visual component. The second is a musical accompaniment. And the third is the story of the game. We had to convey it, but not a gameplay way. It was decided to make an introductional video before the start of the game, cutscene. We had to do it in 2D with normal driving. By the point, Danny had provided me with the story, having broke it down into complex. Beforehand, each complete, that's one shot. I started on the image for the main character. We wanted to him be a middle-aged man, a father to be exact. This will allow an application of many interesting traits formed with age, and leave the backlash for 𝐄𝐏𝐈𝐂 for the future. From the story, you could understand briefly the pre-story for the game and the educated, motivated of the protagonist. It didn't look weird. My job was draw an interesting personality for the written story. After I finished drawing the main character, I started to draw the full scene.
Angel, Ivan and me stayed up all night. We worked painstakingly on the game. We were able to realize really a lot during this night. Ivan was able to achieve the desired result in a short time. All the code was written and he proceeded to create the game menu. At the same time, I started writing music for it. After 3 hours of work, they had the game menu ready, along with the music. By that point, Angel had managed to distribute the main key moments in the cast scene. There are some points of change in the mood of a story, where you can do something driving, where you can lay intrigue, and where you can play a melancholic minor chord. I set about selecting the right soundtrack for the cast scene. Time flew by too quickly. I wanted to have some to add a lot of new things, but unfortunately there were no such opportunities. We had exactly one day, only 24 hours until the finished prototype was delivered.
We had a completed version of a playable build. There were a couple of things I didn't like. As bugs were not noticeable to the player, I only fixed those that were a priority for user experience. Finally, I have achieved the result that suits me in everything. Everything worked correctly and did not give out any glitches, but there was a small nuance that really stuck in my eye. Instead of a grapple hook, we had a white sphere with no textures. It was like a dummy reference point for the time, but now it looked really cheap, which spoils the overall picture and impression of the game. I told Danny about it and he sent to work quickly sculpting the hook. He worked without concepts modeling from his head. It would have taken at least an hour to find the hook concept alone. That's why we had to use our own experience. After 20 minutes, the model was made. It went to the optimization and UV scanning to Kita. Then another 20 minutes later, it was sent to an Angel for texturing. It took the guys a total of 1 hour, the model. I immediately went to the blueprints to replace it and prescribe the correct directional vector for the ejection. By the time, Michael had made 4 versions of the hookshot sound to choose from. By my choice, fell on all at once. Why use one when you can have all of it?
There was already enough time to clock to start worrying. I was finished drawing the scene, there were just a complete stroke left, and I animated the frames to make the picture look alive. The game already looked good at that point. It should have been brought to life and dynamic object should have been added. According to the game's plot, gravity obeys other lives in this world. So island floating in the sky, that's normal, but they looked too static. We had to fix that. Danny took it upon himself to animate the islands, adding the ability to levitate them. 𝐄𝐿 meanwhile was also working on ambient sound in parallel. The sounds of the wind, the rumbling sound of caves, or the same heavy rocks crumbling under their own weight. This is all the work of our musician.
The last night none of us helped. We all worked in the sweat of our bones to do the best they could. For 3 hours I was busy animating the stones and it worked pretty well, but I couldn't achieve the expected effect with the stones alone. The world didn't look animated anyway, everything stood still and didn't look alive. The hovering stones alone created the effect of a living space, but it wasn't enough. I decided to make the walls, which I made back in the first day of the jam, also animated so that they could fly past the player as an ambient animal. But unfortunately, none of them know how to animate 3D models and give them the right rig. So I turned to our material friend from the main project. This name was Vlaman. Since it didn't violate the jam rule, he was happy to be able to help us by animating the whale. After I set the whale to spawn and fly around the map, Michael created the sound of a deep sea howl of a huge sea creature, and even attached them to the whale and graceful the ability to play. In the end, in a short time, we managed to liven up the location quite well and add interest to the dive. The animation for the casting was completely ready, so that we could start debugging it. The productive night passed unnoticed. We didn't have time to look at the time, as it were nearing morning. Let me remind you that we had to turn it at 7 o'clock. Even at the very beginning, we chose a few models for oversales just in case. But the priority was put on RTX. We wanted to show in it the game. Unfortunately, only one of us could afford RTX support. The rest simply did not have enough computer power. So only Ivan could and set it up correctly. But we were lucky enough to live in the same city and be friends. Kita walked to Ivan's house in the early morning, and the two of them turned the RTX. There was too little time left, just hour to the end of the application period, which was very risky on our part, but we continued refine the game. We know that the phase of loading the project into archive was ahead of us and that it takes a lot of time, up to 4 to 6 hours. But we had it all worked out because we had calculated everything in advance and made it real operation with a duplicate project the day before, which gave us an idea and approximately how long it would take us. In the meantime, we had the menu ready, but there was no picture to it. The main poster, which could be both in the game menu and the logo. Without saying a word, Angel said about drawing the menu art, even though it was already 4 a.m. in the morning. Michael had finished writing the music for the cutscene by the point. The last thing the project lacked on the sound side was a lone sound, a slide sound. We had 1 hour left in the game prototype submission deadline. Our fingers were wiped into powder. Our eyes were climbing on our foreheads, and our backs were taken of the shape of a Ouroboros. We tried to add an RTX model to the project and it worked, but the picture is unfortunately quite dark. Michael finished working with the sound of the roll and even tried to prescribe it to the charter. Everything we did last was done in a hurry, so when we added sound to the roll animation, the logic with the charter's connection to the surface break down. Every time he landed on the plane, he was thrown to the side. Of course, we couldn't fix it now, we just had to remove the rolling sound, and the problem partially disappeared. But the contact with the plane was still broken. Angel finished drawing the game main art and sent it to Kita for color correction. But since he was still not at home, he didn't process it on his usual Photoshop, but on his phone, which clearly didn't reflect well. It looked better than that original, but it was dark. In the end, we had what we had time to do. There was no more time. There was no way to fix. With 10 minutes to go, we had time to submit our project and make a page for the presentation. We worked very hard on the jam, and we approached it like we approach everything we take on. And serious and productive as possible, trying to calculate as much as possible up front. Can we say that we made a mistake at the end and overshadowed the whole game? Or that we didn't make it to the sprints? Or perhaps we lacked diligence in something? No, it's not. When you work so much time on enthusiasm only, when there is a war in your country and every day you are forced to sit in a bomb shelter instead of the comfortable chair at home, when you have nothing from the activity that you have been doing for more than 4 years every day and every night, you invest a penny in the project and most importantly, a part of yourself. You're just burning yourself over the little thing. Any feedback will be helpful to us. I'm not asking to beat us to the top or give us an unreasonable amount of the money and other rewards. I'm just asking to notice us. We deserve it more than anyone else. We deserve it more that you can think. Please give us your attention. We will do it much better because we can.
Text prepared by Denis Edman. Translated and localized by Alisa. Special thanks to the guys who supported us: Radmiro, Nemo, and Lemon.